This is Dave Kushner from the Velvet Revolver Experience, and you're listening to the Nothing Shocking podcast.
Want to know what's going on in the world of music? Then tune in to the Nothing Shocking podcast, a non-genre based, all ages friendly rock and roll program. Join us weekly for interviews with all your favorite rock stars from the mainstream to the underground. You can find us at nothingshocking.libsyn.com or anywhere you download podcasts.
We're putting the band back together.
The numbers all go to 11.
I'm talking about bands that rock. Led Zeppelin. What about Sabbath? AC/DC. Motorhead.
Does that mean it's louder? Is it any louder?
Well, it's one louder, isn't it?
We're not worthy! We're not worthy!
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
I get up off the ground and raise my head. Days like this, think I should be dead. One for Satan, two for me. Let's cheat the devil, it's fun, don't you agree?
Welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'm your co-host, Jeff Untied, and with me in Dog Bowl Studio is
Coach Nez.
You can find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Libsyn or any podcatchers. Like our Facebook page or follow us on X at No Shock Pod.
You can also find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Rock Rage Radio every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Central Time. Our sponsor is Ragged Records, located in downtown Rock Island, Illinois, and downtown Davenport, Iowa. We'd like to thank the Hong Kong Sleepover for allowing us to use their music for our intro and bumper ending. And tonight's guest is
Dave Kushner from Velvet Revolver,
Electric Love Hogs,
and Infectious Grooves.
Yeah, promoting his upcoming masterclass tutorials.
I think it's going to be a 4-part series. It sounds exciting.
Hey, fantastic interview. He's going to take us on a journey. Let's get to it.
All right. We just want to take this time to thank all of our dedicated listeners.
Yeah, we're going to take a hiatus here this winter. We got a lot going on, and so we just felt like to re-energize things. We're going to take some time off. We appreciated all of our listeners, and hopefully we'll get back to it here this late spring.
All right.
Good night. Dave, welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'd like to introduce you, my co-host, Jeff Untied.
Dave, thanks for joining us tonight.
Yeah, Jeff.
Man, we are so excited to have you. What has it been like? I've been chasing you down for like 4 years.
I think so, right? At least 3.
Absolutely.
Solid 3 years.
Solid 3 years, and we finally did it. And the crazy thing about it is, this is our last episode, and we're going to take the winter off. We're going to go on hiatus. So we finally got you before our hiatus.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so let's get right into it. This December, you will be releasing your new Masterclass tutorials. Can you talk a little bit more about the Masterclass endeavor, and does this platform satisfy your creative juices?
It actually does. It's funny. I'm actually just at the tail end of editing right now, and I actually, well, we'll get into that later, but the old drummer from the Love Hogs, my old band, Electric Love Hogs, is the one that did all the camera stuff and is helping me with the editing and set up all these cameras in my studio. And he's a killer editor and filmmaker. And so, but I've just been, chunking out the edits on my own and just doing all the different, chapters and all that kind of stuff. But I actually have been really into, in the last year or two, kind of doing other things besides music that have been, because I come from like an art background. So I've been doing some logos for people and I like just writing and editing and doing different stuff than just music. So yes, it is getting the juices going, and, it's good to, get back into, the stuff that's entailed in the class, like, scale patterns and basic theory and songwriting and all that kind of stuff, going through gear. It's cool to kind of get back to those basics.
Very good.
Saw in a couple of the videos you had out there that you reached out to the fans looking for the topics that you wanted to cover in the masterclass, which is pretty cool. Can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, actually, it's funny. I have a friend that works at Gibson in Nashville, this girl, Erica Cruzen, and I met her when my wife used to work with Music Cares, and she hooked me up with Marty Schwartz, the guitar teacher, and he was the one, actually, when I was kind of, asking him for some guidance on doing this stuff, and we might be doing some stuff together in the near future. But he was the one that said, really just start putting stuff out there. And he kind of, I don't want to say inspired me, but he basically directed me to just start doing stuff. And I had already done that one Slither tutorial, and I just decided to do the whole record and just interacting with people, because, look, if people are interested, they're the ones that are going to either, make you successful or not, whether you're, selling a class or you're a band or an artist or whatever,
Absolutely. This seems like a pretty in-depth endeavor, this masterclass tutorial that you're doing, or tutorials. Can you talk about, I guess, maybe like how long have you had this thing going on in your head that you wanted to do this and to make this all happen? Kind of go with the origins of it all?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think it was during COVID that I got into, that actual site, masterclass.com, or maybe right before COVID. I remember they only had like 10 people on there, and one of them was Steph Curry, and my son was playing basketball, and I think he was like 10. And I remember watching the Steph Curry one on like how to play basketball, and dude, I swear to God, this sounds so like ridiculous, but I am a very average basketball player. Like, I'm better at football and baseball, but my shooting improved, like, I swear to God, like 70%. Like, I went to the park one day after watching that with my son, and I was shooting, and just from watching that masterclass for like an hour, my shooting improved 70%. Wow. So that, to be honest, was like a huge, like, oh my God, I love this format. I like the way they were doing it. And yeah, I just kind of got inspired to do something like that back then. But just, like, I'm not sometimes not very self-propelled, and just get lazy, and just got caught up doing other stuff too, like Infectious, and, just doing some sound, some, stuff for TV. So this was the first time I really had time to do it as well. Mm-hmm. And also, doing those tutorials, which I thought was really cool and fun, and people were into it, and I got a lot of good feedback from it.
Oh, very good.
The movies and soundtracks, you had a big hit with This Life from Sons of Anarchy, but you've also been, working on, Marvel Avengers and some other stuff. Can you talk a little bit more about that transition from, rock and roll band into movies and soundtracks?
Yeah, I mean, really, like, the band had ended. We were looking for a singer, but it didn't look like we were going to find anyone. And then Slash started making a solo record and doing his own thing. And then honestly, I got really lucky. And, a friend of mine was my friend Bob Thiel was the composer, was hired as a composer and the music supervisor for Sons of Anarchy when they first started. Like, I don't even think they had started filming yet when we hung out. And it was me, Bob, Brian Ray from Paul McCartney's band, and Scott Schreiner from Weezer. And we're all friends, and we were all like, just went out to eat like at Johnny Rockets, and we were hanging out, and Bob was like, yeah, I'm doing the show, and it's called Sons of Anarchy. And we're like, that sounds really goofy. And just, the name itself. It's like Aerosmith before they were Aerosmith. That sounds like the goofiest name, but the band made the name. So anyways, we just started talking, and he was like, hey, if you want to write anything. And I think for me too, like I always look at it as a big teaching moment, like for life skills where, I have a tendency to say, or had a tendency to say no out of fear, like, oh, he said, if you have any, like, if you want to get together and write something, we should get together. And, my instinct is to say no, because, then you're going to find out I'm not as good as you think I am, or, that kind of imposter syndrome or whatever it is. And I had to like make a conscious effort to take contrary action and say yes, even though I wanted to say no. And I just said yes. And I had that riff, and I'd written with Shooter Jennings in mind, because he and I had been goofing around a little with some music, and I had that main riff, and I just came over with that, and he just said, that's awesome. And we literally wrote that song like in a day. And and then eventually, it became a theme song, and we got nominated for an Emmy. And then I was, the band was with CAA, and the agency, and I said, I think I want to do this, I need like a composing agent. And they got me an agent, and then I got another job with Bob doing actual like score, underscore for this cop show on ABC. And, I learned a lot doing that, because I'd never done it. I didn't go to school for it. I didn't know any, that was another kind of, the motivation to do another master class, which I just decided to put them in different categories instead of doing just one massive one. But I definitely want to do one for, exactly this, like how to, people without formal training, band guys, whatever, can get into this, composition field, because there is so much terminology that I didn't know, and spotting sessions and meeting with a producer and watching and time code and, all these things that I didn't know and learned along the way. And it's really like a different way of writing music too, because it's not, like verse, chorus, bridge, double chorus out. It's really, you're writing to the emotion that you want the watcher to feel, or that the director and the producer want the watcher to feel. So, and it's really more of a team effort, and you kind of have to leave your ego out of it and realize like you're part of a team, and you're helping someone else's vision with the whole thing. And it's not just like, oh, that's my song. You can't be precious about it in the same way.
Well, I mean, talk a little bit about, I guess, on a satisfaction level, working in scoring film and soundtrack or whatever you're doing, opposed to, being a rock star. I mean, do you get the same satisfaction, I guess, creative satisfaction from inside doing the scoring and working in soundtrack and TV and whatever?
I mean, I think it's a different kind of satisfaction in a holistic way, because, coincidentally, like right when the band, what year was it? 2008. Right when the band ended, dude, I had my first kid in 2008, right when the band was over. And, I have two kids now, and they're both teenagers. And I think, sometimes maybe not sitting in the room do I go like, I write some piece of score that's, because sometimes score is not super exciting. It's just like a pad going, like to make someone scared, or it's like some strings, just like some guy just lost his dad or what, like, and that sometimes might not be as exciting, obviously, as playing in front of thousands of people in a fucking Coliseum or whatever. But the holistic satisfaction of being able to work from home and be around for my kids and get to take my daughter to volleyball practice or go to my son's football games, or you know what I mean? Like, that's all part of it. So it's like, I think, like I said, holistically, it is satisfying because, and look, sometimes when I write, I'm writing this today. I just finished this stuff for like this monster truck toy, commercial, but they wanted like all the inspiration songs were like Anthrax and, Pantera and Eagles of Death Metal. So, then I get to write this 30-second, song and work with my buddy Frankie Perez, singer. And so I get, stoked on doing that kind of stuff. So
fantastic. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, can we talk a little bit about the Forest Rangers? I mean, that was the band behind the Sons of Anarchy songs and stuff in the show. Can you talk a little bit more about your involvement with that and some of the other band members?
Yeah, I mean, that was a funny thing, man. Like, that was all Bob Thiel. Like, he had this idea when we first wrote the theme song, and he started doing music, and we wrote a couple other little pieces of music for the first season and subsequent seasons. But he really had this whole idea, like, to create this kind of fictitious band that would be the house band for Sons of Anarchy. And then, because he kind of knew like a lot of it was going to be covers, and he kind of had the sound mapped out, and I think obviously the theme song kind of helped some of the direction of the vibe of the show, or vice versa. And I remember we were just in his studio, and he's like, yeah, I want to make it like a house band, and like then if I have Katie Segal sing on something, it'll be Katie Segal and this band, and we were trying to come up with names, and there was this band in LA, this like indie band called Plexi, that my friend Michael Angelos was the singer and bass player, and they had this song called Forest Ranger, and I don't know why, but I also always loved the band. And I was like, dude, what if we call them the Forest Rangers? And he's like, oh, I kind of like that. And it really was like that simple. Like, it was basically based on a song by a band called Plexi called Forest Ranger, which was their like single. And and that was it. And so, and Bob's dad wrote What a Wonderful World that Louis Armstrong sang. Yeah. Like, Bob Thiel Sr. co-wrote that song, and he was a big, had a label called the Flying Dutchman, and he found he's a huge writer, and found like Gil Scott-Heron and all these like cool jazz guys, and so Bob, knows tons of people and had these killer musicians that he would get to kind of play with the Forest Rangers, and handful like session guys that are just really good. And so that was it, and then we would just, and then once in a while we'd do some gigs, but yeah, it was fun.
Well, fantastic. I wanted to bring this back to the online tutorial stuff, and we see more artists doing tutorials and online lessons and many other similar systems like that. Do you find these platforms necessary for I guess artists to stay sustainable in today's music scene, in the business?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not gonna pretend that it's not potentially, because look, I haven't even done it yet, so who knows? It may be a massive failure. I mean, I don't know, but hopefully it'll help some people. And I think for me, I really, it could be good, it could be bad. I mean, the class is good, but I mean, the monetary outcome and success, I just don't know. So I'm not doing it for that reason. I'm just doing it. I mean, yeah, I would love to make some money and would love to have it be successful, but I think that, you know, I have to really come from a place of service when I'm thinking about doing it, you know, because I think that then it ultimately feels more genuine and it's easier for me to swallow. Like if I know, okay, well, you know, I'm trying to help some people, and now there is all these channels and ways to get these things out there. But, you know, I went to GIT, you know, Musicians Institute when I was 18 instead of going to 12th grade because I was just a bad student and, you know, I didn't want to go to college, and my mom and dad had a little bit of money saved up, and I was like, I want to go to GIT, and they're like, okay. And, you know, so I'm just showing people what I learned, you know, and especially I think with the composing thing that I want to do even more so, you know, because look, there's a dime a dozen, I feel like, not a dime a dozen, you know, there's 1,000 guitar teachers out there.
Sure.
And guys that have been doing it way longer than I have, you know, but I mean, I know a lot of stuff and I have a lot of experience, you know, playing in, like you said, you know, a big rock band and sharing some of that experience. And I like to just be kind of, you know, I was lucky in the band in Velvet Revolver to, you know, I didn't become successful when I was 19 years old and become this huge rock star. And, you know, I was like older and I had just, you know, was struggling for years, and then this thing happened, and I feel like it you know, it kind of helped ground me in a way that, you know, maybe some others weren't. So I just try and convey that when I'm trying to help people learn some shit, you know, especially, like I said, the composing thing, where I have a lot of friends, you know, I grew up in Hollywood, like, that are band guys that want to make that transition and just don't know how, and they'll call me and say, like, what do I do? Like, how do you get the video in the session, and how do you know, or what does it mean when they say? So, you know, I think when I come at it that way, then I'm not as worried about, like, oh, I hope I'm going to make some money, and I hope blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I know besides guitar composing, the other topic that you might be talking about is, did I read mental health? Because that's very important in the music landscape. Because you know, we've had a few years there where it was pretty tough with some of the people we lost. But can you talk a little bit about that passion, of you know, helping people out on that end?
Yeah, man. I mean, you know, I've been sober. You know, I haven't drank or did anything else for 30 plus years. And, you know, I was the whole time I was in Velvet Revolver, before that and after that and since then. And, you know, I feel like I've learned some tools, you know, along the way to help me with, you know, different temptations, or, you know, like I said, imposter syndrome, or, you know, just fear and taking contrary actions and being of service, and, you know, all these things I've learned in my life that just feel like life skills, you know, that have helped me become the man that I am, and, you know, helped me navigate being in a you know, band with 4 guys that all had massive success, and at different times were drinking and doing drugs around me, and, you know, being able to stay sober in that situation, and be married and get married and still be married. I'll be married 21 years on Friday, and have 2 kids. You know what I mean? Like, all those things, it takes work. And I feel like I have a lot of experience with, you know, different tools and utilizing tools and helping, you know, people stay sober, or helping people kind of navigate all the different all that different stuff, which, whether it's just, you're just a person living life and not creative at all. You could be a school teacher, an accountant, and have the same insecurities and fears and self-doubt and all those things that we all have, whether you're, a musician or not, or a filmmaker, an actor, whatever. I mean, obviously in the creative world, it's, I think, more prevalent, or sports, because there's there's kind of a monetary goal that's based on, especially I think musicians, it's like, I'm going to bare my soul, and your judgment is whether or not I'm going to be successful or not. So you're very, you put yourself in a vulnerable position to get judged. And if everyone judges favorably, then you might get to make a living at it, which is a tough thing. And I think that it's I mean, I think it's taken out a lot of friends of mine, and, it's like, it's crazy when you think about it, and I was thinking about just like the Seattle scene, of those top 4 bands, there's one guy left.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like Eddie Vedder is like the last man standing of all those bands, and whether it's drugs or combination of insecurity and drugs and all those different things, it's a real thing, man.
Yeah,
absolutely. Now, the crazy thing is that you answered that question. You said teacher and accountant.
I know. I'm like, how did he know what we do?
That's what we do in our day jobs. One's an accountant, one's
really?
A teacher. Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy.
Let's move on here. Yeah. So let's get to Velvet Revolver. It is celebrating or it has been celebrating the 20th anniversary of the Contraband album with a double vinyl re-release. Can you give our listeners an insight to maybe the opportunity of re-releasing this album and the packaging for it?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, like the band didn't have a lot of involvement in it as far as like, oh, we want this and we want that. And then we want, it was more like, one of them's not around. Then there's me. And then there's, the other 3 guys or at least Duff and Slash are pretty involved in solo bands and GNR and all that stuff. So, we didn't all get together, and I wish I could say we all got together and handpicked all the covers that were on the record and everything. But, we were consulted and they asked us, what we could do. And unfortunately, we don't have a bunch of extra material, because in the day, back in like the early 2000s, every time you put out a record, you'd have like Best Buy wants to do this limited release with you guys. So they need some extra songs, or Walmart or Target, or, there was all these different ones, and like everyone wanted something special. So you had to, if you recorded 16 songs and put out 12, the extra songs would have to go with this thing or that thing. And so, and we just didn't have a lot of extra songs with Scott's vocals on them and stuff. So we just thought it'd be cool. And, between us and the record company, that we just have something. And I think it's cool that it's a double vinyl and, like a fold out thing. And it's kind of true to the original packaging, but I dig the double fold out, and the extra songs are cool. Yeah. Cover songs. I actually listened to it day before yesterday. I listened to it a couple times, but listen to those covers, and like that cover of Bodies we do, the Sex Pistols song.
Yes.
I think might be from that first El Rey show. So, hearing that stuff was cool to me, nostalgia wise.
Very good. I did want to interject here, and Jeff and I were talking about this before you called in, and I don't want to be, I hope I'm not stepping on toes when I say this, but I always felt like Velvet Revolver could have been one of those bands that could have went on as a project. It didn't matter who the lead vocalist was because the band was so awesome. Was there any thought process of after Scott's passing that this band could go on with different lead singers, I guess, throughout time?
Yeah, I mean, look, we must have, not as succinctly as you just said it, but obviously we felt like that as well. Because, you know, like, whatever's out there, like, we fired Scott, you know, at the end of that European tour, and we were planning on getting another singer, and we tried out, you know, a shitload of people. I mean, we tried out, who did we try out? We tried out a bunch of people. Mm-hmm. And it was really way harder than we thought to replace Scott, and because we had done 2 records and because we had done something specific that was Velvet Revolver, and because it wasn't like Van Halen where it'd been around for like 6 records and then got Sammy Hagar. You know, it's like we did 2 records, we were still kind of young band, and then to just replace someone, it's like, you know, they had to be able to sing the old stuff the way it was. They had to be, you know, I mean, Scott was an incredible writer, you know, as much as, I mean, that guy, dude, was really the complete package. If ever there was one that was like, you know, on stage, off stage, obviously to his own detriment, he was the complete package. And as a writer, and you know, like, he wrote all that stuff on those records. Like, he wouldn't even like let us, you know, like, I remember, like, he wrote a song and we were kind of like, there was one, it might have been Spectacle or something. There was like a chorus in a song where we were like, it's not great. It's good, but it's not. And I remember, like, I think it was me and Duff and Matt were all standing around and we're like, hey, you know, I think Duff said something to him, and he's just like, was not into the idea of us contributing at all vocally, you know, to the writing process. So, you know, it was difficult, and we looked for probably a year, you know, and the only guy that we actually had in the band that replaced him was this guy, Frankie Perez, that I mentioned earlier. And then it just didn't work out. You know, there was some like, I forget why, but, you know, he and I have remained good friends to this day. Like, I literally talked to him today, you know, and met him in 2008. So, and he's killer, you know. I don't know if he would have been the perfect guy, but he sing his ass off. So we worked with them for a little bit, and then we kind of moved on.
Did you guys, was there any truth behind, did you guys try out Royston Langston of Space Hog?
Yeah.
You did?
Yeah, I think he was the first guy, because I was a huge Space Hog fan.
Yeah.
And I saw them, like, at the Whiskey on that first tour when that Resident Alien came out.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was, like, so into that record, and I forget how I found somehow I found him, and me and Duff, it's funny because me and Duff always kind of saw eye to eye on singers. Like, we were always kind of more open to, like, when we tried out that Jimmy Necco, the guy from Hours.
Yes.
And you know, we were always, and Duff was a huge Jeff Buckley fan, and I was too, and I saw Jeff Buckley play at the Roxy when he's, you know, first record came out, and, you know, we were more open to those kind of not so specific rock guys, you know, those guys that had like kind of more something to their voice. So me and him were super like into Royston, and I think we did we sent him a demo, and we used to send like blank songs to different guys. And we had sent him something, and there's a couple songs, I think I have the demo still, with him singing on them, and they were killer. But I think he had a little bit of hard time with the other stuff, with our stuff, because I didn't realize, like, he sings really soft, like, if you really listen, which I never really kind of put it together until I worked, we worked with them. But if you listen to the Space Hog stuff, it's really kind of soft. It's like, you know what I mean? It's all kind of quiet and reserved. And Velvet Revolver was not that. So then when he was trying to sing the other stuff, it was a little bit outside his comfort zone, I feel like.
Yeah. Well, let's take it back just a little bit before Velvet Revolver. I think you were playing with the band Zilch. When you first met Duff McKagan, can you talk a little bit about getting involved with him and the band Loaded?
Oh, yeah. So my buddy Joey Castillo, who played drums in Queens of the Stone Age, and now he's playing the Circle Jerks. We were in this band, this LA punk band called Wasted Youth, like I think it was like 1988. And we became really good friends, and we've been friends ever since. And we played in Danzig together, and we played in a band called Sugar Toot together. And we had always, played together in different projects. And he was doing this project called Zilch, which was the guitar player from this huge Japanese rock band called X Japan, that were kind of like almost like kind of like Kiss, but they would wear like kabuki makeup instead of like Kiss makeup, but they were huge. They would sell out like Tokyo Dome like 3 nights in a row every year, and there was a guitar player in there called Hide, and Hide would do solo stuff, and then he was really into he was super into like Rob Zombie and Nine Inch Nails and all those kind of bands, and he wanted to kind of cross over into the US market, and he was really into that kind of heavier stuff. So he wanted to do a record, and somehow he hooked up with this guy, Ray McVeigh, that used to play with Steve Jones. And so they made a record with Hide, and Joey played on it, and the bass player from Killing Joke, and they just did it like as a project, and it was called Zilch. And then right before they were getting ready to do a tour, Hide died. And then that was done, but then they said, well, we'll do like a tribute thing, it'd be like a tribute to him, and do this tour and blah, blah, blah. And his brother, Hide's brother, was on board, in Japan, and the record label in Japan was on board. So I didn't know any of this. And Joey called me and was like, dude, I'm doing this project, and it's called Zilch, and this guy was like the Michael Jackson of Japan. He's a guitar player, and that we really we need a guitar player. We want you to do it, and if you want to do it, why don't you come down to Mates, the rehearsal studio? And I was like, okay. And I just showed up, and as I got there, they started explaining more. Because then he was like, we're leaving in 10 days to Japan. I was like, okay, dude. And then, I got more and more of the story, the more days I was there. But even like the second day, they're like, there's this guy from the label and Hide's brother, and they might give you the stink eye because they're kind of like, going to look at you like, this is the guy you picked to replace Hide, playing guitar. And I was like, shit. All right. It was crazy, dude. And then I went to Japan, and I met, the craziest part was I still didn't know much about Hide, because you got to understand, dude, it was 2000 and there was barely an internet, so you couldn't just look up shit on the internet. and like everyone had dial-up still if they, and just all the information wasn't out there. So it's like, then I flew to Japan, and then I was literally walking down the street in Tokyo, and I started seeing all these like dolls, like Hide dolls, like these little pop-up things, like, kiosks and shit, and his picture and was everywhere. And then I talked to my uncle, who's a librarian, and he was like, he's not like, never talks about music, and he's like, oh, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm doing this thing, blah, 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 and Hide. And he's like, oh, I saw that guy's, the guy from Japan. I said, oh, you know who he is? He goes, I saw his funeral on CNN. I was like, what? Really? And there was like 100,000 people or something at his funeral in Japan. And so then more and more slowly got like, revealed about how big he was. And the night before the first show, his brother came over, and his brother didn't speak English at all, but he was just super nice. And he brought me these VHS tapes. And, so I was staying in this hotel, and I call the front desk, I get a VHS player up to my room, and I put in these tapes, and they were Hide's solo band live performances at Tokyo Dome. And it was just fucking so amazing, over the top. Like, the guy had like a yellow suit and a huge pink mohawk and would just run around all over the stadium like a maniac. And, then I was like, oh, fuck. Like, shit, this is what I got myself into. And I got to play tomorrow night to a bunch of Japanese fans of this dude. Like, fuck. So yeah, it was definitely daunting. But yeah, I did that for, we did that tour. We came back, we did another tour, and then we made a second record that I played on. And then when we went back for that third tour to Japan, we did this show, and the Cult and Duff's solo band Loaded both opened for us in Japan. So like, it was funny. Matt was there, and Duff's band, and then Duff and I grew up with Slash, but I don't think I had met Duff at that point. And I had found non-alcoholic beers, like in Japan. Like, I was like, oh, I found these I always call them near beers. Yeah. And I was like, oh, dude, I found some near beers. Like, and he wasn't drinking. So we just literally hung out like all night after the gig, drinking near beers and just bullshitting. And then we just became friends from then on out. And I wasn't even playing in Loaded at first. We would just hang out and like go to the movies and stuff. Like just a couple of dudes, like, hanging out and go to dinner and go to the movies. And, it was just like my new friend. And then eventually two of the guys that were in Loaded left. And then he asked me if I want to play guitar in Loaded. And then we started doing that. And then that eventually led to Velvet Revolver.
Yeah. Oh, very good. Well, Infectious Grooves, the plague that makes your booty move, is kind of considered to be ahead of its time for when it was released sonically.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about the creation of that album? I guess collaborating with Mike Muir. He's kind of a mysterious guy. We can't ever get him to do an interview with us or anything like that. He doesn't really. He kind of flies under the radar as far as doing media. Yeah. But can you talk about the whole process, work with Mike, creating that album, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, I only played on one song on the first record. Mm-hmm. I wasn't really in the band or super involved with that first record. But what happened was there's a producer, Mark Dodson, that did the suicidal record Lights Camera Revolution, which is like my favorite suicidal record. And I was in a band called Electric Love Hogs. This was like 1991 or something. And the Love Hogs got a record deal, and we had to make a record. And we loved that Lights Camera record, so we got Mark Dodson to produce our record. And Tommy Lee to produce with Mark. And because Mark had seen, Tommy had seen our band, and he was looking for a band to produce. He really liked us. And so we started working with both of them. And Mark, to his credit, was like double dipping. And so we were in the studio in the Valley in LA, and Mark was producing the Love Hogs record and the Infectious record at the same time in two different studios in the same big studio. So there was like, and I had known, I mean, I get the way I was a part of that first record, besides playing on it, was Adam, the other guitar player, I had known since I think we were around 19 or something when we met. But he was like just part of LA graffiti scene, and we were friends. And I used to do art at Tower Records. I used to make the signs for the inside of the store, and I was like the head of the art department. And I hired Adam to work for me, like prior to that record. So I was friends with Adam, and then I met Trujillo because Adam was like painting some jacket for Robert, and Robert came to Tower, and I met Robert back then. And I knew Stephen Perkins because when I was going to GIT, I had to make a demo, and I saw Jane's Addiction, and I asked him for his phone number and if he wanted to play on my demo. So I knew Perkins, and then they were trying to get in touch with Perkins, and so I connected Robert and Adam with Stephen Perkins, who ended up playing on that first record. So that was my involvement. And then literally, Mark was like, dude, why don't you come over and play a solo on this song? Because it was, the Punk It Up song, and
right.
I used to be in a punk rock band. So he was like, why don't you play on this? And I was like, okay. So, but that was kind of the extent of my involvement back then. I didn't really know Mike very well. I mean, I knew him, but was like, he was the same kind of mysterious dude back then to me. I was more afraid of him back then because I had grown up in the LA punk scene, and I knew he was the singer in Suicidal, but there was also like a Suicidal gang, or I don't know if it was an official gang or, I don't even know. But there was just these hardcore punk rockers from Venice that were scary, and we used to get in fights with the punk rockers from Hollywood, and then there was like the Valley punk rockers, and everyone used to get in fights and stuff. And so I knew him as that dude, as being like a Hollywood, since I was the Hollywood punk rocker. So I was always kind of a little, like, oh shit, it's Mike Muir. And then but then we just became, I don't know, we kind of became friendly. We weren't like hanging out or anything. And then he did this solo record, that Psycho Micah record, and was like, hey, we play on that. And so then I kind of got to know him a little more, because me and Adam both played on that solo record that he did. And, and then I would just see him around once in a while. We never like became friends, like to that extent where we were hanging out and doing stuff together. But and then I played Infectious for a little bit because Adam left back then, and then I was in the band for like 6 months, and then Adam came back, and then I left, and then that was kind of it way back then. And then I went and did Velvet Revolver, did all these other things, and then dude, it was so weird. I was at this house party like 9 months ago or whenever it was, and Robert texted me, Trujillo, because he and I have been good friends for forever, and he texted me and was like, hey, can you talk? Which was weird because he's usually not that like serious,
right? So
I stepped out of the party and I called him, and he just said, hey, we're doing Infectious and we're going to Australia, and Mike and I thought it'd be a good idea to have you do it if you want to do it, and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, fuck yeah. So it really was that. And then that's how it came back.
Fantastic.
You talked a little bit about Electric Love Hogs. I guess what else do you have in store for 2025?
Well, I got all the Masterclass series. What else am I doing? I do this brand ambassadorship for this company out here called Galpin that is a car company, which is really cool because I'm friends with the owner and have a bunch of dealers like Porsche and, Aston Martin and Ford and Lincoln and Lotus and just all these cool brands under their umbrella. So I've been working with them. I've been doing some artwork for them. I've been doing some creative, I don't want to say creative director, but like creative stuff for them. Some marketing stuff, some logo designs and stuff like that. So that's pretty rad. I'm still doing that, masterclass stuff. Actually, I wrote a script over COVID with Bill Burr.
Mm-hmm.
And he and I probably next year are talking about making this TV show that we had this idea for this animated TV show, like an adult animated show. It's music based, and so we wrote a pilot during COVID. He and I, and we're pitching the show, and then if we don't get a bite, then we might just end up making it ourselves.
Yeah, awesome.
Fantastic. All right, got one last question for you, then we'll leave you alone. Deal?
Yeah.
So, you've been a longtime user of Fernandez guitars. You also have 2 signature models. Can you tell our listeners a little bit more about your partnership with Fernandez and, how long have you been affiliated with him?
Well, it's weird because someone just told me recently that they're like done. Fernandez filed for bankruptcy.
Oh no.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't even think they're, so as far as I know, dude, they're just not, they don't exist anymore. So sadly, if you didn't get one, you're not going to get one because they don't make them anymore. But yeah, that's what happened. I connected with them years ago because this guy, Scott Uchida, who eventually worked at Dunlop, but he was their kind of artist guy, and we knew him from Love Hogs, and he was Robert Trujillo's old bass tech. He used to work at Tobias, and then he ended up working at Fernandez, and I liked the guitars back then. I started playing at the end of the Love Hogs, and then just always liked them, and Robert was playing their basses, and eventually they kept coming out with cool models. They had this Vertigo model, and I just liked their stuff. And then I was playing those Revels at the beginning of Velvet Revolver, and they just said, hey, if you want to do a signature model, if you'd be into that. And I was like, yeah. And so it was just very organic that way. I was already playing them, and I just I was like, oh, I wanted to look like an old hot rod. So I actually went to found this auto paint store out in the valley that that had all this old vintage hot rod style paint, and picked the color and brought it back to Fernandez. And that's where I got the green color from and the blue. But yeah, they were great, man. But then I kind of split from them towards, they came out with that blue guitar, and they switched companies, or they switched manufacturing plants. And then the next models I wasn't as stoked on. And there was some kind of little things where, I wanted, I don't know, it just didn't work out. I wanted it to look a little different than it did the blue one. And they were like, oh, well, we already started making them. I'm like, well, but I asked for this and I asked for that. And you said that's what we were going to do. And now you're changing it. And I kind of got back into the thing of, really thinking about if I'm a kid, when I was a kid and I was buying stuff because, other dudes were playing it, it meant a lot, right. I wanted a green Charvel because Steve I was playing a green Charvel, and so that's why I tried to put together a green Charvel, you know, and that stuff was like meant a lot. And I didn't feel good because I'm like, all right, I'm putting my name on it, and kids or adults or whoever are buying this because, you know, partially because I play it or because they think my sound is cool or whatever. And that's part of the reason they might be buying this. And if it's not something I would play, then it's not really cool to just sell it just to sell it, you know? So that's when I left and actually started playing Gibsons because I just wasn't into where the quality, you know, and where it was. So then I bailed.
Yeah. Fair enough. Well, we're out of our allotted time for the evening. Is there anything that we left off tonight that you would like to plug or promote?
I mean, really, I took the time to actually put together a website. Finally, had one years ago, but I put together a new one that's just, you know, DaveKushner.com. And I'm really working hard to kind of funnel everything through there. So, you know, and obviously Instagram, and you can find me there. And I started a YouTube channel finally, and where I could just put up all those tutorial videos. And so, but you know, you can sign up at the website. Like if you go to the website and you sign up, you know, to be on the mailing list or whatever it is, there's like a free lesson on there, shredding in the blues pentatonic scale, shredding the box, it's called. So, you know, just for signing up, you get this free lesson. And, you know, then you'll be on a list so that you'll get all this information about whatever it is, new merchandise or classes or tutorials or, you know, all the stuff. So, yeah, that's it.
Very good. Well, this is how things are going to work out once Jeff, the editing ninja over here, gets my boogers and his boogers and everybody else's boogers cleaned up. We'll get it to where it sound like $1 million. Sound good?
Cool. Sounds good, man. Yeah,
well,
just let me know and I'll, you know, promote it or do all that stuff.
Absolutely. So, Dave, it was an honor, and I was glad I was persistent after all these years to finally get you on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for doing this with us.
Dude, you really win the fucking prize for tenacity and gumption.
I was like, man, there's no way.
Sorry, dude.
Well, if you can remember, I think it was like 4 years ago. We had you scheduled, and then you had some kind of conflict or whatever else, and then I lost your email. I could not find an email for you. I was like, so I was hunting you down on Instagram.
Yo, dude, I totally remember because I played with Dave Navarro, and you know the fucking name of the podcast was like not easy for me to forget. So, you know, I was like, oh shit, and I always felt bad.
Hey, we finally did it. We're so happy that we had you on.
Sounds great, man. It's good talking to you. I'm glad we finally hooked it up.
Absolutely. All right, man. Happy holidays to you.
You too.
Take care.
Have
Bye-bye.
a good rest of the week. Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
and says their last goodbyes. Move to the sunshine, fight the grip of nights. If they ever take from you, then you plug out